What we'll just do, if we can start at the end, and we can start with James at the end, just to introduce yourselves. I will caveat, Ruth and Mel, we can skip you. You've already been introduced, thank you. But if we could just briefly introduce yourself, your role and your organisation, that would be fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm James McIntosh from Catch. So Catch is an industrial membership organisation based on the south bank of the Humber, but we're a pan-Humber organisation, so we also train skills and apprentices. Most of our members are on their own decarbonisation journey, so we're very much focused around delivering skills and apprenticeships for net zero industries.
Councillor Mike Ross, leader of Hull City Council. I'd like to think most people know what that means, but I wouldn't guarantee it. So obviously local authority here in this very place we're sat now.
Fabulous, thank you.
Councillor Handley, leader of East Riding of Yorkshire Council. Really interested in what we're talking about today. I didn't think I'd have to retrain at my age, but this is absolutely taking over, is decarbonisation, and trying to run and catch up is really, really hard.
Hi, my name's Duncan Hammons, so I work at the Phillips 66 Humber refinery, and I head up our decarbonisation projects there at the refinery. That's carbon capture, hydrogen, renewable fuels, sustainable aviation fuel, all of the above.
Fantastic. A great diverse panel. Lovely. I'm going to pick up where Sally Ann left off, and that last question. I'm going to actually throw something at you, if you don't mind, James, which was what we said around collaboration, and in fact what Catch are doing and how we collaborate. So Sally Ann wants to know how we're collaborating, and I think what Catch are doing at the moment is a great example for the Viking CCS cluster of collaboration. So maybe you can elaborate on that, and then maybe you can jump in as well, Duncan, because obviously Phillips 66 play in that. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, no problem. So we've known about the skills gap for several years in our industry. So our members have been telling us that, and we know we've already got a 2% loss of the workforce every year for business as usual. So when you throw in decarbonisation projects and some of these huge infrastructure bills in the Humber, it's anticipated that we could be as many as 12,000 people short of new roles. That's new roles for new projects. So the Viking cluster, of which some of the companies are leading in the room today, came together to collaborate with each other as projects and ourselves as a training provider to effectively produce a solution. So we also know that we can't be the only solution in the region. So we are one training provider, there are 11 colleges in the region as well. So there's lots of education, lots of training establishments available. And we know that collaboration is essential to find the people, to train the people, and then have destinations for those people as well. And it can't just be about apprentices and young people. It has to be that mix that was alluded to earlier. So new entrants includes upskilling and reskilling from different industries, ex-forces individuals, potential ex-offenders. The whole shooting match of the labour market needs to be utilised for skills. I think for the first time, we're probably seeing industry collaborate on a grand scale. Effectively 7 or 8 huge employers building some really big infrastructure projects, but working together on a skills problem is quite unique.
Yeah, really. I don't know if you want to add to any of
Yes,
that.
as James says, at the refinery, we've recognised the skills gap for the past decade, really. I'd say, 10 years ago, you'd quite easily be able to get 2,000 people to come to site to do a big maintenance overhaul. Today, we struggle to get 1,000 people. So we've had to change our maintenance strategies around that. And that kind of gave us a bit of a, pragmatic realisation. Okay, we're all planning to do these big mega projects, the size of which, hasn't really been done in the area for a long time. Who's going to build it all? There's just not the people out there. And by the time that you've been through the process to award contracts to people that are going to build it, it's too late. They need to have those people in the chain now, getting trained up and ready to go. And we kind of thought, well, with the big projects coming along, we, as the main customers, because we're basically the customers wanting these projects built, what can we do to support the industry in order to kickstart that? What level of investment is needed in order to get that off the ground? We've heard that the government has been looking to do similar things, and us as an industry thought, well, we know how to do this stuff. We want to get this stuff done. We see the benefit for us in the long term. So if we all chip in a bit, let's get this thing going, and then hopefully we can have the skills resources there in the future.
I think to just add to that slightly, Corrine, sorry, in terms of the cluster itself, it's realised that the investment that they're making in skills to catch from 100 to 1,000 new entrants a year, these aren't skills necessarily for their own workforces. It's for the supply chain. So the supply chain that Duncan refers to build these projects won't end up working for Phillips and RWE and the like. They'll work for the supply chain. But somebody has to move first, whether it's government, contractors, or supply chain or clients. So it's great to see the clients are actually invested in not only their own skills, but skills for the rest of the supply chain.
Yeah, you want to? Yeah, please. Yeah.
I think the point that I wanted to make really is that and the moment steal thunder from both of the leaders here in terms of devolution, and it is it's not that far away. There's works kind of starting now, isn't it, in terms of strategies and priorities, but we need more than one provider to be working with industry to meet these numbers. The numbers are huge when you look at the Humber Industrial Cluster Plan, which has had a lot of money spent on it to evidence where are the skills gaps and what the future needs will be. Huge figures in terms of these mega construction projects, and it needs more collaboration than there currently exists. And I do think that is a role for the local authorities to convene and facilitate, whether that's now or waiting for combined authorities and then subsequently mayors. I think it's a big area that needs collaboration.
Yeah, do you want to come in, Anne?
Yes, please. So I couldn't agree more with what the three of you have said. And I was in Westminster on Tuesday morning this week, sat round the table with Lord Callanan, telling him exactly what you've said, that we've got a huge skills gap that needs to be addressed. And it's not just a couple of thousand, we're looking at tens of thousands of people that we need to get the right skills for. He actually acknowledges that. I also said, and I don't think I'm wrong, that without us, you cannot reach, this government or any government will not reach its net zero targets. So if you don't come and give us what we want, they can't do it without us. So we actually need, he did say, he listened and he did say it's a long process. And I said, but it doesn't need to be a long process because we are here, we are waiting, we are ready to go. There's £15 billion worth of investment waiting to go into the Humber. I do not want to see that go to anywhere else in the world. I want our jobs for our people in our area. So that was the message that I gave to Lord Callanan on Tuesday, and he got that quite loud and clear. So I just wanted to jump in and say I am in there and I am batting, I can assure you.
Excellent.
No, it's good. It's good to know that it's being echoed. Mel, we spoke about green jobs and moving on from skills. So this is a question as well, like when we're communicating about levelling up and training skills, and that in interpretation of the word green jobs, are green jobs green? How do we communicate that? And is everyone in the industry and government talking about the same types of green jobs when we talk about green jobs? Sorry,
I don't think that they are talking about the same jobs. I have to say, I think, green jobs, it's good in a way because in terms of communicating with the general public about green jobs, it is something, to look forward to. We can't have a green jobs task force and then say, actually, there are no green jobs. Every job's a green job. It doesn't really make sense. What have we got a task force for then? But we are very aware that lots of jobs will move into becoming green jobs, particularly, got Duncan say, Phillips. Lots of Phillips jobs right now might not be considered a green job. In energy, we know the Humber is a high emitting area for carbon, but as we start that decarbonisation process, presumably you will expect within the workforce of Phillips that some of those will fall under a definition of some kind about that it qualifies as a green job. And I know that there are other companies that have already started to change the way that they work or change the areas in which they work. So they are kind of diversifying. So they might have worked with oil, so particularly on supply chain companies, they might have worked with the oil and gas industry for years and years, but they're starting to develop new skills within their workforce so that they can also work in CCUS and hydrogen and renewables and solar. And that's where we start to see that that kind of divergence. So people become multi-skilled, and actually the notion of a green job then becomes much more difficult to define, but certainly is in there. And I think, for people, even in the NHS, I mean, I went to a really interesting talk. We could see the NHS jobs, for example, become green jobs, whether they are moving to electric-powered transportation vehicles, whether they are looking at changing the types of storage for the gases that they use to help with pain relief, or the asthma pumps, how they are produced. I mean, the NHS is looking at loads and loads of different things to try and decarbonise the NHS. Obviously, it's massive, but that will also filter down, I suspect. So we'll see, even within organisations like that, there will be jobs that will end up being defined as being a green job.
So I suppose I don't really see them as green jobs per se. I just see them as jobs out there, and that it's those long-term jobs. And I think the green jobs is being used there to say that there is a future for it. Because if you were to say to somebody at school now, do you want to go work in oil and gas, they'd probably say, well, that's going out of business. Whereas the reality is, no, it will be around for the future. We are doing our part to make them more carbon neutral, and by doing that, they're becoming green. We try not to use too much green because get accused of greenwashing too much. But really just getting that message out there that the jobs will be there for the future, because we need the industry out there. We need the steel works to be making steel. We need the power station to be providing the power and the electricity. We need the oil refineries to be providing the hydrocarbons. We're all working towards decarbonising those industries, and by virtue of doing that, yes, eventually my refinery will be green, I suppose.
Yeah, did you want to come in?
Yeah, well, I'd sort of add to that really. First of all, say it's lovely to be on a panel and hearing devolution being talked about as not Anne or myself, which has been fairly unusual the last couple of months. So thank you for that. I think just on this issue around green jobs, I think there's always terminology is really important. I think the classic example of this is I was at Siemens yesterday, where obviously a massive boon for this city, the Siemens factory there. Essentially, it's a manufacturing base, isn't it? They are making something. It's manufacturing. They are green jobs. It's to do with the wind industry and so on. But they are making something. And so this is about jobs that do stuff. I think there's a danger, essentially the point there around, if you talk about green jobs, it can potentially put people off and scare people potentially because they don't really understand what it means. But if we look in terms of what these jobs are actually about, that just helps get across a lot better in terms of what we're talking about.
Yeah. So we've touched on about, there's a common theme that we all agree about collaboration, and we all agree that we're on the same thread, and it requires investment. And that was one of the questions about investment. I think it was 18%, if I remember correctly, that it was left on from private investment. Catch his ambition with the apprenticeship scheme is to date mainly funded and has been initiated correctly by private investment. So how do we replicate that? What are your opinions on how we can replicate that on a broader scale across the Humber, but then nationally as well? Because it's not just a problem here. I know we're talking today here, but this is not just a Humber issue, is it? This is a national issue with decarbonisation.
I think it's back to that collaboration word that you used initially, is that we feel that the Humber now has the model to enable the other clusters to join the model or grow the model. I think it tells you a lot around the private sector putting funds up when they don't have guarantee that their projects will get funded at the moment. So it's a huge investment from them to try and prime the pump for skills to get people into industry. I guess my caveat to that would be, if carbon capture and storage, touch wood, gets knocked by the government, we still have got a huge deficit in our industry regardless. So the investment in skills now will feed that gap. I guess that's the message from me would be around, we've got two problems. One is the current gap, and then the future gap as these projects come in commissioning.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we've talked before, didn't we? We talked in the first session about some sort of certainty policy framework from national government, some sort of commitment to pipelines, whatever big scale infrastructure that might be across the UK, then there needs some sort of longer term policy, environment, local industrial strategy, and then commitment to infrastructure. And we know, don't we, through the Humber vision document, that £15 billion worth of investment could flow on the back of that commitment to the pipeline. And I think if businesses can't collaborate together on their skills and talent pipeline, because it's pre-competitive, I'm not sure what they can kind of collaborate on. So it's just one of those issues that your future talent is, you've got to invest in it in some way. And therefore, you probably need more models like the catch model elsewhere to be able to kind of take that forward, and however they get off the ground, but it is a costly business, kind of running education facilities, so you're going to have some private sector investment in that to de-risk it for you, because after all it's a commercial business, isn't it?
This is to Michael, Anne. How do you see local authority playing their part in this, in supporting?
Well, if I can just say, part of, I hate to say this, Mike, but part of the devolution deal
I didn't say I wasn't going to mention it later.
is the £16 million a year index linked for skills, which I personally am delighted to see, because I spent 17 years working for the whole college group, trying to upskill young people, actually not trying, but successfully upskilling young people into jobs, not green jobs, because there weren't green jobs, and sending people to the catch. And what you do there is wonderful. So I would like to think that we can work together on those skills with our local colleges, and we have got close connections with our local colleges and university, of course, and we've got the Aura Centre and Catch on how we can help them deliver them skills, because we will be allowed to use that money to upskill and skill our own workforce rather than doing what we're told to do. So part of devolution is that we can use that money for our young people in our area to get those jobs, which I want to see. I don't want to see a mass exodus away because we haven't got the jobs here. I want us to be able to keep them here. But with all those jobs we have to take into account, we'll need more infrastructure. You can't have one without the other. So the public services and housing and all the infrastructure that goes with that will also have to be accounted for when these jobs come. That's my thoughts. So I'm hoping that Mike and I can get together and use our skills budget to look after our people in our area.
So I think for me, if I was on the doorstep and talking about these sort of issues, I wouldn't, in a sense. I'd be talking about placemaking in the sense of the streets, how clean they are, the environment people live in, how safe it is, things like that. Because as local authorities, there's that place leadership role in terms of actually overseeing that places look good and that they suit the demands of the residents. On the macro level, this is very much part of that place agenda. The decarbonisation agenda is very much part of that. This is around actually recognising this is a key priority issue for the area. We know the Humber is one of the biggest emitters of carbon in general. This is a key issue for this region. We want to see that investment come here. I'm talking about doing it through the skills agenda and devolution. There's other aspects around devolution which play into this. This is very much about place making as well in terms of tackling the carbonisation agenda as well.
Yeah. Really good point. I don't know the answer, but it'd be interesting to know how much money is required for the levelling up for the skills. I said I'm not going to throw that at anyone. It's just a general thought. Like 16 million per year is a nice amount, but actually, how much is needed to plug that gap? And yeah, I thought you might. Do you know that one?
I won't give you a figure exactly. I think for me, it's great to hear that. First off, we're having similar conversations on the south bank of the Humber, so it's great to see that local authorities collaborating again in utilising skills funding. I think for us, it's about how can we work with industry to understand what those pathways need to be. Young people apprenticeship is fantastic. It's part of the solution. For me, one of my soapbox topics is around how do you fund reskilling. So there are lots of funding available for unemployed people to come into work, great. That's also required as part of the solution. But if I'm working in a fairly paid job at the moment and I see there's a job as a welder going to build a carbon capture and storage plant, I could triple, quadruple my salary. However, I've got rent or mortgage to pay, children to feed, etc. I can't afford to take 6 months, a year out of work to retrain. So there's a huge gap there of people who will want to move into our industry. They've got all the attributes and behaviours to enable that transition, but they're locked in that position because they can't take that risk. So if something around that, whether it's central government or skills funding, I think it's essential to provide pathways to our industry.
I think some of that is around also just, you say in terms of the amount of money that's needed. So obviously that commitment of the £60 million that Anne mentioned there is good and is welcome. I think there's also around that what that potentially unlocks from the private sector as well going forward as well. The fact that they can then add to that as time goes on. I think that is the start, and then others can add to that over time. And so the council working alongside HEFE providers, private business as well, to assess and work out what those skills needs are through things like the local skills improvement plan, which the Chamber's leading on, is all part of that assessment, and then putting the pieces together that need to be there to match that ambition.
And can I just add that during the talks that Mike and I have had with the government on our deal, one of the things that we did push for was to keep the apprenticeship level here. So what wasn't spent, it came back in to this area to reinvest in skills. And that was an argument, sadly, at the moment that we lost. They don't want to give us that at the moment, do they, Mike? But that's not to say never, because there's always another chance and another opportunity to go back, because what happens with that money, it just goes back to Treasury, and then we don't know where it goes. So it doesn't actually go back into the Department of Education, it just goes back to Treasury. Well, I would like to keep that, and we would like to keep that, won't we, Mike, and redistribute it in the East Yorkshire area. So
I think if anyone can make that happen, then you can make that happen.
Just, Mel, if I can, with your experience and your background with working in offshore wind and the number of delegations that we've had internationally come across and dealing with, is there anything we can learn from different countries that they're doing and how they're addressing their skills gap that perhaps you see that we should be doing, or things they're doing that what we're doing well that they're not even? You know, it's not all doom and gloom.
No, I know. Well, I mean, that's it. I mean, we have had so many delegations of people all across the world coming over here, whether it's from the States, whether it's from Taiwan, you know, and European countries too, all coming here because they can see that there has been a lot of support. There's been a lot of acceleration. I can't carry on talking about that unless I just talk about the collaboration point, because Sally Ann, you were talking about collaboration and what do we think would actually work. And I'm thinking, well, we have the Humber Vision 2030 document, which kind of sets the direction of travel for the area. I think we need to keep hold of that, and I think we can probably move forward, and I've just written down, we can call it Humber Power, so we're giving some power to our elbow, and bring people from all of the we've got joint leadership board, shadow joint leadership board coming from the mayoral structures, bringing those joint leaders on board now, bringing all the key parties who have contributed to the Humber Vision, but are, you know, active in different trade associations, the ICTB, all of those that are relevant, and, you know, have that as, you know, pull together some kind of conference around reminding people about the vision, picking a subject within that vision document and elevating it in some way, and keeping that going, because unless we keep talking about it, we'll just forget about it and it becomes a document that sits on the shelf and we never do anything with, which is everybody, I think's pet peeve, isn't it? You do a fantastic 5-year strategy and stick it in a file and forget all about it. So I think that there is something very real, and then, you know, we are we're Humber doing it for ourselves, if you like, and we can take that to government, and everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet, and that just helps to drive the progress as we wait for that devolution settlement to arise. On the delegations, so people come here because they want to, and they do this all along the East Coast. I mean, I know, Corrine, you've got, you know, everywhere from kind of Teesside all the way down to East Anglia, and each of those areas, those clusters are kind of doing slightly different things. So up at Teesside, they're doing really well on the kind of manufacturing stuff. That's really good, and they've got a very innovative catapult, which I'm quite jealous of, and I'd like to see more of that in our area as well. But we do lead and excel. I mean, we've got Hull's Siemens plant, obviously one of only 2 blade manufacturers in the entire United Kingdom, looking to double its footprint in the area as well. So its workforce will increase, which is really positive. And the operations and maintenance, and the operations and maintenance had a discussion a couple of weeks ago. We had a visitor to come and visit with RWE and come and visit with Ørsted, and they were like, actually, we need to stop talking about operations and maintenance. It doesn't mean anything to anybody. What are the actual jobs? What exactly going on here? So kind of demystifying some of that. But actually, things that, still the world's largest operations and maintenance base in the world, which is quite astonishing for little old Grimsby to be holding that title and still clinging on to it until presumably China takes over at some point. Phenomenal activity. And they want to see, one, how we have worked with other industries that have been traditional industries in the area that, maybe have been displaced, maybe there's been some conflict with. They want to see how we are engaging with the local community and explaining exactly what's happening behind those closed doors. They want to know what's happening in terms of skills and how we are talking to young people, how apprenticeships are working or traineeships are working. And they want to see how we've transitioned as well from getting even local authority permissions. Getting Siemens across the line I don't think was an easy task. I don't know if you were a councillor at the time that was happening, because it's been around for a little while now, but it wasn't an easy task to get Siemens over the line. So how did that actually work? What kind of permissions did you need? How did local authorities ease any of the burdens, make it more favourable for Siemens to come here rather than to go to Teesside, for example, or anywhere else they were looking at? So there are lots and lots of lessons in terms of, because we are quite actually advanced on offshore wind in particular, we do tend to be the place that people come to learn about that. But there are other places that have fewer regulations, have a bit more kind of sped up. I don't necessarily agree with that, I have to say, because there's quite a lot of environmental protections that we build in to make sure we're not disturbing seabeds, that we're not killing kittiwakes, and other wildlife, porpoises and whatnot, in all of that. But when it comes to having a set process, they kind of learn from our mistakes, because we've been learning as we go. So they can condense what we have learned stage by stage and do it all in one go. So rather than having individual companies having to do repeated environmental checks, which can take 2 years, 3 years in a whole planning process, they just have, a single set of expectations. It is done in advance, so companies don't have to build that in, and it just shortens the time that they can go into their kind of construction phase and their getting their green energy delivered. Can we go back and change how we do things? Maybe we will.
I wonder, Duncan, is there anything, obviously being a parent company, being American, if there's anything, if you don't mind me saying so, originally anyway, anything that you've been brought across from any of your other businesses elsewhere?
No,
from the skill side,
I suppose
or you've taught them anyway?
Our US colleagues are very, very keen to see what we're doing here in the UK. So I would like to think that us as the Humber refinery are ahead of the game when it comes to decarbonising the oil refining industry. We've started processing renewable waste oils through the refinery, use cooking oil, pyrolysis oil. There's got other ones in the R&D lab looking at the reprocess, which is a lot further advanced than they are in the US. They're now just starting to see that, so they're looking at how we're kind of doing it and what they can learn from us. They're also quite interested in the whole geopolitical environment. And the bit that we kind of like have to keep on trying to educate them on is they're very much the two parties, aren't they, over there? And they're very much of the mindset, well, as soon as the new administration comes in, all bets are off, start again. Right. Whereas we're trying to do a lot more of the coaching. No, it's not quite like that in the UK government. Both parties have the same ambition. They're all working towards net zero. So yes, they might have a few differences, but the direction of travel is still the same. So whether it's a change of government or not, it's still an industry that you want to invest in. and continue forwards, because they're a little nervous about an election this year and saying, okay, where's it going to go? So that's the thing that we try and educate them more on.
Interesting. I was going to open up any questions to the floor. I mean, there's plenty of questions I can ask, but if there's any dying questions that anyone had, I know some people had their hands up from the previous one. I didn't get to ask questions, but if not, I can jump back in. Yes, at the back, please. Sorry.
Hiya, I'm Councillor Judith Matthews from Scunthorpe. So obviously the steelworks is huge. It's got a huge community impact as well. We're, 2,200 jobs. We've got a lot of steelworkers that are set in their ways and believe that they can't retrain, or what jobs could they do, and they are worried, they are scared. We've also got the youth that would work at the steelworks, but like you say, a job at the steelworks was for life. My dad's 80, he was a steelworker and, incredibly proud, and his grandson would have followed into that, but he wants a secure, safe future, so he's looking at the renewable jobs. But we are trying to, find out what these electric arc means. We haven't been told how many jobs the electric arc will give. So we've got steel workers with families, they've got mortgages. Now they're thinking that they're going to have to move out the area to get another job. That will be a huge community impact, and it'll be a devastating one. Thank you.
So I think the question, perhaps summarising, is the effect of the new Steel Act. Can you give any enlightenment of how many jobs you think it may create? But maybe either any of the councillors or even Ruth from the LEP might have an idea of.
I think
it's hard to judge, isn't it?
In terms of what's left and it depends on the size. Yeah. There's so much that is up in the air at the moment, right? and timing as well. And there is again this kind of East Coast tussle, I think, between Teesside and the Humber about who gets an electric arc furnace first and who gets the scale to be able to.
Because they'd be welcome to the electric arc first, right?
Yeah. So it's it's so difficult, isn't it? Because you want to kind of have a greener method of doing things, but potentially is absolutely devastating to a community, and so difficult because we've actually given away all of our power, all of our responsibility when it comes to steel, which I think if it had been brought into being part of an industrial strategy and being considered part of critical infrastructure or critical manufacturing to the country, would have been a very different story. It is just, it's now under Chinese ownership, I think. It's still called British Steel. Is it still? Yeah. It went reverted back. So, the whole thing is really, really challenging. And I think that, we've got very little control over those owners in China to do the right thing. I'm saying this partly because I'm not ever so close to it because it's a little way away, but I did meet with some steel workers in the area just recently who are feeling very, very downbeat about the prospects. And there isn't a lot of clarity around exactly what is going to happen. But the numbers that would be required for electric arc furnacing as opposed to the traditional methods is much less.
Do you want to come in on that, Duncan?
Well, I see them as very, very transferable skills. I think if there's a big infrastructure project in the area, be it a carbon capture plant or a blue hydrogen plant or a green hydrogen plant, whatever it is, one of these big industry type projects, they are very much transferable skills that they would quite easily be able to retrain and fall straight into the people that are needed to build those projects. And then once one project comes, the next one will come, and then the next one will come. And I can foresee a good, if we get the infrastructure into the Humber for carbon capture and hydrogen, then the projects will roll in for the next 20 years. Just keep coming.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And not forgetting that there's also the opportunity to look, again, going back to what Mel said, as offshore wind and looking at manufacturing parts for component parts. So there could be a place here in the Humber for component parts. So we may not necessarily manufacture the actual large, bigger steel parts. There are still the component parts to the other areas of the turbine that could be made, the smaller component parts that could be made. So there's cross-industry, and I think it's a really good point that once one initiates, then, like you say, it kind of snowballs. So that's a really good point. There's a gentleman with a blue and red tie. Sorry, I don't know your name.
I was just fascinated, it was on the previous discussions we were having, but fascinated to work out how we reconcile the difficulties of carbon capture and going green when the UK produces about 0.9% of global carbon emissions. Now, that doesn't mean to say we shouldn't go there, so I'm not going down that route. If 30 or 40 countries all doing just less than 1%, that's a great deal towards the global climate, so I'm not suggesting anything. But what I am suggesting is that we have, and you were mentioning it earlier, we have steel production as one of the obvious ones, which is why I was trying to reconcile that, which uses massive amounts of power, and we can't produce basic raw steel without we have Bessemer converters rather than electric arc. And we're moving there because China produces and commissions one new coal-fired power station every week. Therefore, in 6 weeks, we've just negated what the whole of the UK has done. And it's really difficult when they produce steel so cheaply because of that and send the raw steel to us that we will never be able to compete with that unless we put tariffs on, and tariffs would then cause a major problem with the rest of the world. So I'm just trying to work out, how do you think we could resolve that extremely difficult scenario?
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive conundrum. It really is a massive conundrum. And, I think that, what we have done is set in statute that we are going to be aiming towards decarbonisation. And, as we've had representatives of established industry here saying it doesn't disappear overnight. And I think that there is something around steel that, we could have a longer term plan for steel. We could have something that is a bit more gradual, that doesn't terrify communities, that allows us to adjust out of having that raw steel. It is always going to be a challenge, though, unless we enforce companies to use UK steel rather than Chinese steel, which, when the bottom line is tight, it is, I can't imagine any company welcoming that amount of interference. But there is, I really think that we could have had a sliding scale when it comes to traditional steel making, and utilising our national infrastructure projects to support it, and keep supporting communities through retraining to still maintain that goal. I think that the Climate Change Committee has already said we're not going to meet the initial targets that were set in 2008. It is a terrible shame, but continuing to work towards it and do as much as we can at pace. If we'd have pursued the White Rose project, which was the original carbon capture project that was mooted in 2010, I think, or maybe even before. New to it, maybe even before 2010. Where would we be now? It just feels like there have been lots of missed opportunities to really, get hold of supporting the UK's decarbonisation efforts, as well as then supporting industries and communities that require swift action on decarbonisation.
That's just made me feel really old now, because I went to the White Rose carbon capture events,
right.
And I can't believe that's all those years ago, and
must be.
It's been all that time we've been on it. Yeah, gosh.
I think there's a few more questions from the audience. First, the lady in the red, and then the gentleman here in the blue vest after this. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Clark. I'm from the University of Hull. So you've talked a little bit about the university sector, and obviously you've got some FE representation on the panel as well. I just wondered, particularly Anne and Mike, how you think the university sectors can help progress devolution, particularly around innovation, but also if there's anything else that the university sector can help with, bearing in mind it has some incredibly difficult challenges currently, and this isn't just Hull, this is across the UK.
I've actually been in touch with Dave Petley and Louise Smith this week about devolution, carbon capture at the Aura Centre and what we can do working together. And she's given me some incredible information that I've got here, and I'm not going to read it out to everybody but it really is. And what you're doing at the university is outstanding, I have to say. And you are on that journey. And I'm quite sure, I'm delighted to be working with the university, and I'm sure so is Mike. It's a wonderful place, and I'm quite sure that we can work together with you to actually help out the university once we get our hands on the money, for definite. Mike, have you got anything that you want to?
Well, so in terms of the role of the university in helping achieve devolution, I mean, obviously the university came out a few weeks ago with its position on devolution, which was supporting what was coming through, which was really welcome. I'm a graduate at the university. I'd like to think it was not that long ago, but it was actually quite a long time ago now when I actually graduated from there. And it's good to see that they made this strong statement in support, because I think it's around, again, sort of going back to what I was saying before, around place and placemaking. I think the university through that was recognising actually what a difference devolution can make to place. I think when it's about putting all the pieces together, isn't it? So if you see it as a jigsaw, putting all those different pieces together. So the devolution, what that unlocks, education, higher education, the ability to attract people here, the investment that this region help attract more people to this patch, and then it's that sort of circle approach. That's what it's all about. So the university being a part of that, so both in terms of the strength in terms of the teaching side, but also the research side, I think it'd be critical around helping get people into this region. That's what we need, and all of this should be about attracting people to come and invest and work here.
I think if I can just jump in here, from an RWE perspective, the role that universities play are fundamental. So we have strategic MOUs in place with universities for the innovation centres and innovation that they create in the sectors. So again, I'm going back to offshore wind because it's a good point for me, I think, for us to look at and as a benchmark of lessons that can be learnt from a sector, and ideas in place for the rest of decarbonisation, and working closely with universities and the likes of yourselves in order to create and foster innovation around the technology in order to help fast track that and push us forward, but also keep things like costs down, maybe come up with solutions of how we can make steel cheaper and keep jobs, and use that innovation centre as a nucleus as part of our decarbonisation is key and core as far as I'm concerned. And I know very quickly, James, you wanted to come in on that as well.
Yeah, I think as part of our project, yes, we have a focus on that level 3 sort of trades level. However, we know industry and the projects has got that through life development pathway requirement. So we're talking to Hull, we're talking to Lincoln about R&D, innovation, automation, robotics. And because these jobs that we'll be working with these companies are project management positions, they're chemical engineers, chartered engineers, they aren't things that we deliver. So it's that whole skill supply chain collaboration as much as it's the industry supply chain collaboration that's important.
Brilliant. Just got 2 more questions, time for, I think. This gentleman here, then the gentleman at the front, and sorry, the lady, maybe 3, depending on how quick they are, maybe 3. This gentleman, that gentleman, and then the lady in the red, so yes.
Hi, so my name is Farak. I'm from True Green Energy Group. Unfortunately, it's not really a question, but more of a point. So, Melanie, the desilosization that you need to move forward, there's an idea called the quadruple helix. Okay, that means that you can't get societal change without 4 groups. That's government, industry, academia, and society. If you embed those 4 groups in a program, you will achieve societal change. And so please just to take that on board. Also, just to come back to one of the points here about the steel and the import and export, I think that the EU have the CBAM system, which is a carbon border adjustment mechanism, and that levy, I mean, hopefully, I think we're trying to introduce that into the UK, although it's not been discovered. I think that's something which could really quite help with those import and export of products. And my other point, which, there we go. Okay, so when we're talking about energy transition, I love the fact that we have these future ideas and we have these goals that we're aiming towards. My company, we invest in those things and we're involved in them. However, I think it's very important to understand that transition is change, and that means being pragmatic about our approach to what we can fix immediately. So For example, it's great to talk about electrification. Personally, I think it's the wrong way, but there we are. However, we're going to be using diesel engines for the next 30 years, like it or not. Is there a way that we can reduce emissions from things that we are going to be using, instead of looking at spending a lot of money on things like electrification? Doesn't mean we shouldn't do that. Doesn't mean we should invest in new diesel technologies, but it means that we should try and fix the issues that we have immediately. And that covers the skills gap and these sorts of areas. But I think a pragmatic approach, and also with the financial point that you mentioned, if a business has a solid business plan, it doesn't matter whether it's a green energy, it doesn't matter what it is, it will be of benefit. So it's not like just putting money into a hole. You can see where the benefits will be if you have a pragmatic approach, and potentially not necessarily pie in the sky ideas. So I just wanted to make that point. Sorry. Yeah.
Let me summarise some of that then, maybe, and just take maybe one question that I can potentially ask the panel very quickly. Is there any quick wins that we can do in the interim for the longer term vision that perhaps we may have seen as an oversight, the initial quick wins for progressing us forwards for decarbonisation? Aside from obviously the skills gap that we've talked heavily about, the level of...
So I'm going to talk on sort of perhaps I hesitate to use the words smaller scale, but in terms of when we've been talking about sort of energy transition, anything else, it might look at. But in Hull, obviously, talk about the role of local authority. Well, one role is around that convening power in terms of bringing people together. I think it's really important. Then you look in Hull, we've got OES Net Zero, which is collaboration between council and private sector, which, obviously heavily led by Reckitt's as well, which is really good. And I think actually that sort of model of just peer-to-peer support to people, I think some people in the room here who are involved in that, is a really good way of actually getting those quick wins at that local level in terms of those companies being able to bring in schemes that is of benefit to them, and who may not have otherwise thought that it was relevant to them or known how to do it, but because of the systems being set up there, they're able to take part and actually get those quick wins done.
Thank you. Right, if we can just, we've got 3 minutes, and I don't want to eat into people's networking time, so can we keep it short and sharp?
Hugo Marfleet from Lincolnshire County Council. Job opportunities is definitely what we need. I drive around Lincolnshire, Grimsby, Cleethorpes, Scunthorpe, through in Hull and all the rest of it. It's not an area that's thriving. It's not an area that's looking prosperous. And when I go along the Humber bank, you think there are some great companies here. We really have got some great companies. But if you look at the synergy of like a solar farm, somebody comes in from outside the area, blots the landscape right across Lincolnshire, puts a solar farm on, disappears, all the money goes out of Lincolnshire and not a single job's left in Lincolnshire, maybe apart from someone mows a bit of grass. It's not a longevity, that. And yet it's what everyone keeps screaming about, the future. And we have to be very careful here. I think companies, we have to look at things differently. If you go to London and look at the great wealth of London, you can stand in Newham 100 metres from that wealth. You can touch it, you can see it, you can smell it, but you have nothing from it. And I think that as businesses, and we look at these future ideas and the renewable energies, we have to look more at what businesses can do to support communities and not just think, hey, I've employed 10 people, because it's not about that anymore, because we need something different. Because I drive around and I'm seeing Lincolnshire getting more like a retirement park than a thriving opportunity for youth, because you can't even catch hardly a bus or train from around the north bank of the Humber that connects anyway. So here we are talking about futuristics, yet you still can't jump on a train and go to work on it or anything else. So I think my view would be is when we talk about these ideas, you really have to start thinking differently about how we're going to engage and work with communities to deliver a better offer, and not just everything goes out, and actually that the employment really is for the people of Lincolnshire and Yorkshire, because we need it.
So I know that you'd like to come in, Ruth. As a business ourselves who build solar farms in the region, I'd like to just make a comment if I can. And I do understand perhaps the perception of what that is, because they are an asset that needs low maintenance. We don't just leave the area. We create something called a community fund, whereby we put a pot of money in that you can then apply for. That helps local charities or local organisations. So we try to give back in that sense. And we do then also try to employ local persons where possible to maintain that, and also local technicians that will then need to do that on a long-term basis. Solar farms, there's different legislations that come around with government with regards to them. Unfortunately, not everyone likes a solar farm, but they are actually required. Going back to the initial point we made earlier about energy security, we need a blended mix of different energy types. And unfortunately, they are one of the assets that are required. For ourselves, as I mentioned earlier, some of our counterparts, I'm going to go back to offshore wind because I know the figures, 500 people locally on the South Bank have been employed by one of our opponents in their local jobs. We've just, within the Lincolnshire region, 90% of our persons that work on our O&M base are employed within the Lincolnshire area. And I think something like 80% of those are within a 5 to 10 mile radius of the actual site itself. So we do look where possible to create that longevity as a larger business. I don't know, obviously, if anyone of Phillips want to come in, because I know you guys are quite heavy with local.
Yeah, well, I hear what you're saying about the area, because we struggle with it as well. You know, we bring in graduate engineers from around the country. They spend 2 or 3 years getting skilled and useful, and then they go chasing the money elsewhere in the country, and we start again. And it is building that kind of like area that people want to live in. So I would say what I'd be looking for, you know, as these big projects come, is what are you going to give back to the community? How are you going to make this? What's the legacy? You know, we've kind of like talked about our legacy that we want to do is expanding catch, providing the training facilities to have more jobs. So I very much see it as for when these big projects and government investment, it doesn't come without the government funding. Is what are we going to give back? What's the legacy, and what can we do to improve the community?
Did you want to come in quickly, Ruth, and then follow by
Good to see a fellow yellow belly. So first of all, that point. But I think it's more than about community benefit. It's about, both leaders have talked about place shaping, and there is an absolute role for business in place shaping, and particularly in places that need levelling up or rural communities. It's much wider than that. It's a whole systems kind of approach, isn't it, to skills and to transport and, to really working in partnership with that. And there needs to be some sort of aspiration or inspiration, for not just for very local people, but, for a wider kind of community. So I think it's thinking outside the box of what we mean by community benefit, not just a fund that is, there. I think it's about being that long-term partner. And there's some great examples of where that's kind of happened, but it doesn't happen as a matter of course, does it?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I was at the RWE in London on Monday talking exactly about a solar farm in Lincolnshire, actually, a huge one that you're about to have. And can I just say that I'm the Goole East Riding councillor, and RWE came to us quite a few years ago and built Goole Wind Farms 1 and Goole Wind Farms 2. And I know what you've just said about the community benefit, but the community benefit that RWE, what they said was what they would do, and they've done exactly what they said on the tin. I have to say that on behalf of RWE, because they actually did and still do and will continue to support our community. I just want to say that because
there was kind of two issues in that question. One is around solar farms and that aspect, but the other aspect I think was also around the region and the attractiveness of the region. And just on that point, I love this part of the world. I lead the council here in Hull, so I'm obviously committed to it and I want to see the best for it. I think, if we're honest, the region's not always been the best at shouting out for itself, and it's not always been great at actually telling the rest of the world what it's got. And I think that's recognised. I'm not still saying anything new in that sense. I think there's actually work taking place to try and counter that. But I think the point around this is actually incumbent on not just this panel, but the people in the room and further afield to actually go out and say, actually, this is what the region's got. And when you compare it to other parts of the country, it competes very well, but we've not traditionally always been great at actually telling people that. And so we go out and tell people that. That's what will attract people here, but it's not going to happen by itself. That's got to be a conscious effort to do that.
Right, I'm going to squeeze in one last question for this lady at the red, and because we're short on time, I'm just going to pick one of you, I'm afraid. Lucky dip.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the time and thank you for this nice event. So my name is Councillor Sarwal and I'm also a researcher at Hull University. So I've been listening for the both sessions and they're very useful. One of the things I totally agree is the community awareness. In terms of decarbonisation, we know that the part industry is housing, transport, farming, and all of these have got little factors. What would be the plan to, combine all of these together to make the decarbonisation targets, involve all of these different sectors? What we're gonna do for our next, generation as of now in different part of, community, or let's say how we're gonna educate our society. What is our role in this? Thank you.
Do you want to answer?
I'll try.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, for me, from the education point of view, we've talked about universities, we've talked about FE colleges. It needs to be in schools. It doesn't need to be in years 9, 10 and 11. It needs to be in years when they start school, that our young children need to understand from the day they start school about what's in their area, what the education is, what they need, what the skills are. That needs to be something, a golden thread all the way through this area in education. So that's my first thing that I would do to look at. And obviously, the transport, we need to look at that. There's lots of things we need to look at, but for me, everything starts with education. And if we get the education right from this age all the way through, then I think the rest will follow. But I think it's incumbent on everybody in this room, and particularly councillors, to actually go out there and sing from the rooftops what we have here, what we have got, what we have achieved, as Mike said. We are a great place. Lincolnshire as well. Where's Lincolnshire? Lincolnshire is just as well. And I think what we need to do is show the rest of the country that we are here and we are open for business. That's what I
And
I
on
hope.
that note, which is a lovely note to finish, can we just give a round of applause and a thank you to our panel? Thank you very much.